Okay, we'll go ahead and start with our next video on our project, which is a React application where we're doing create, read, update, and delete functions on student entities. And so far we have created students, we've done a search algorithm to read, we've done a delete, and today we're going to finish it off with an update along with some other topics. And there are going to be some potential probable, I will say, future videos where we continue to, I would just say, do some cleanup tasks, some refactoring of the code, maybe add some additional smaller features. But the major features are going to be CRUD, and this will be the last of those operations. And so in today's kind of to-do list, we're going to organize our components. We're going to add Font Awesome to our site. We're going to write some custom CSS, and we're going to add the edit feature, the edit functionality. And so to kind of starting off with the organizing the components, and so right now, kind of clicking through, I'm noticing a couple things. I have a lot of logic here in my app.js, and probably too much logic here. And so in the future, I want to simplify this down, and you want to keep app pretty small and just calling other components. And so really in React, you're just working with components, and you want to have smaller components that are reusable. And so we've made some components, but there's a lot going on in apps. I do want to refactor that in a future video. But anyways, back to the to-do, organizing the components. We do have one custom component, which is student.js. There's also an add student.js. And so what I'm just going to do here is just a little bit of organization and make a components folder and kind of drag our custom components into there. And what you'll notice here is that when I move it, you also get this nice little prompt for updating the path. And so now inside of my app.js, when I import, it now has that path. When I import the add student.js and call it an add student element, it updated the relative path. So that's nice. So that's just something I wanted to do real quick. And then I'll also add in my student.js. And do you want to update the imports? And I'll say yes, and there you have it. And we can organize all of our custom components in this way. The next thing is to add React Font Awesome. Now there is a Bootstrap React, and just like there's a unique library for Bootstrap, we are just using kind of we're not using React Bootstrap. Let me kind of show you what a React Bootstrap. And so we're just using regular old Bootstrap. And so you can kind of see here we use npm to install React Bootstrap instead of just Bootstrap. In the beginning of this, we just installed Bootstrap, and then you run an import statement, and then you now have a button element, and ultimately you can use that button element as so. So since we already knew Bootstrap and we're familiar with Bootstrap, kind of the convention that I have been using is just to install traditional Bootstrap and just use those classes kind of in our HTML as classes. And so we have a lot of Bootstrap classes like form labels and so forth. React Bootstrap, you might be able to just install Font Awesome. You might be able to just install Font Awesome, but I haven't found that feature where it was there for Bootstrap. Instead, I am going to use React Font Awesome, And to do that, you can kind of follow the docs here, but you do need to install these various packages. And so I'll start by going to my console here and running these package installations per the docs. Kind of start with these 3 installs. Okay, and if you follow through the docs, we don't need additional styles. There's a couple of ways you can do this: individual use or global use. They both have their pros and cons. I have chosen to do individual use, and so there's 2 imports that you need to run, which is here. And so I'll go ahead and copy this into my let's say add student. And so here under my add student, I'll have these imports. Now this line 3 gives you the tag font awesome icon, and then this is the individual icon that you can use. And what's nice here is you can just start typing, like for the add, you can see FA add. You kind of get some help to see what icons are supported through these packages that you've installed. And so if you do, like a search, later on we'll do a search. And of course you can go to the docs and see what's all out there, but it's also nice to just have FA add or like I'm like imagining like a plus. So here's a plus circle, and so this will be the icon that I end up using. Now, where do I want to use this font awesome icon? I'm gonna put it on the button. Right now it's a button success that says add student, and I'll add now I have the font awesome tag. You put the icon in its own attribute, and the icon will be our variable, which is FA plus circle. Okay, now let's go ahead and do an npm start and see what's broke. Wait for it. Okay, there's our add student. And so Font Awesome is working inside of our React app. I'll go ahead and put an icon on each one of my buttons. And so on each delete button, I'll put some sort of warning symbol, put a little magnifying glass or search glass icon on the search, and do another icon for the edit, which we're going to do in this video. So the add student was where I was able to kind of target that button for the new student. But here in student, let's see what buttons we have in here. For the student, we've got remove student. Again, I think when I refactor my code, it might make sense to add maybe keep it separate, maybe put it together. I got to figure out the right answer to that for my situation. Point is, getting back to this is the delete student. So let's bring in our Font Awesome. And so we'll come up here. And at this point, I'm not using my use state. Warning, FA warning. And here, delete student. We can now use the font awesome tag with an icon equal to FA warning. And bring that back, and now we get the warning sign there on our delete student, and just to demo that it is still working. You know, this shouldn't have broken anything. Desktop programmer. Okay, so add student still works, delete student still works. Search student still works. Okay, so all of our features are still working. I'm not breaking anything. So let's go ahead and bring in the search. And so this is now interesting. If I do this, just trying something out, you could see that doesn't work, which would make sense. But sometimes I just like to poke and see what breaks. So where now is the last button? And the last button is search. And again, right now, I think this really needs to be refactored. I got code kind of spewed all over the place in places that aren't making sense, but my search is actually kind of down here back in app. So for sure, want to refactor that out. But here's my search, and here's my button. And again, I'm going to have to bring in the imports into my app. Let's put semicolons at the end here. You know, I just realized this is missing from the React library, bring in the use state function. Okay. But on this one, we want a search. So FA search. And font awesome tag icon equals curly's FA search. Okay, and we're just getting some nice icons on here. And so now we've got font awesome kind of going. So we've organized some components into a folder. We've added React font awesome. Now we're going to write just a little bit, not much, custom CSS. And so since really this is all about CRUD, I'm going to kind of section off the different pieces into visibly different sections on the page. That's all I'm going to do is add some wrappers around this with some box shadow and some simple things. So let's just do add student first because this is a fairly clean file. And here you could see on my add student, I've got a row kind of starting with, so I'll go ahead and throw on an ID. We'll just call this an ID of add student. And in my components folder, we'll go ahead and say add student.css. We'll write some CSS, and here, don't forget your semicolons, let's import, in quotes, / for same directory, add student.css. And so now this file, this JavaScript file, has access to my add student CSS. And with that, let's write a little custom CSS for the add student ID. And let me take a glance at what I want to do here. So we'll do a little border radius on here of 5% on all 4 sides. We'll throw a box shadow on, 5 pixels, and black. So we got a little border radius, box shadow, a black border, and some padding on all four sides. And so clearly now, and I just whipped this together. I didn't, it was neat enough to just kind of throw some box shadow on it and some funky rounded corners and separate that out. So our CSS is working, and we'll do the same for searching, and we'll do the same for displaying. I guess the last thing worth adding is I'll add a little heading in my JSX, like an H3. It says add student, and we'll give it the matching green look on all the labels. So add students in green, maybe search will be blue, something, but you get the idea. So now that you know how to add your own custom CSS to your JSX, to your HTML, we could do the same thing in student. And so we'll make a new file called student CSS. Now, as I'm thinking about this, student is just every individual card. Outside of here, if I'm remembering correctly, here is where we're mapping each student. And so here's the outermost div. And so I want to actually apply my CSS here, which is in app.js. Actually, I'm not going to do it here in student.css. I'll leave that there for the future in case I want to use import /student.css, just in case I want to use that. But there is an app.js and there's already an app.css, so that's already wired up and linked. Now it's worth noting here, since if it is a importing a JavaScript file, that's why you don't have to include the .js. But if it's a CSS file, you have to include the file type. So app.css, here's app.css. Let's kind of throw an ID on this, and right here we'll put an ID. Now this is just displaying all students, so we'll just call it all students. Let's go ahead and target all students, and I'm just going to put the same again. I like trying stuff. I just want to try. I'm just going to try putting it here. I didn't like it. Let's see. Compiled module not found student.css. Okay, notice it's in a different folder. Let's put it in components. There we go. Okay, that did not work. It was my guess, but let's bring it back in here. Here's all students. There's that, and for all students, we have a box shadow around it, and the text color is black, which is fine. Add students green. This really isn't going to make or break what text color do we want. I'm just going to stick with black for this. It's already black, so we're not going to do that. And back in here, all students, we did an H3, current students, Okay, so we display our current students. We have our add students. The last one is search. And search also happens to be inside of app. So here's our div for search. ID of search student. So back here we'll do comma ID of search student. Is it singular or plural? I forget so quickly. Singular. We'll say plural. Search students. Probably you're going to be searching for multiple. Okay, so we just got some boxes going around here and some padding. This label is causing this to not be like aligned up properly, right? So I could probably just, I mean, you could get rid of the label, but a lot of times they're there for screen readers, so they're a good thing. So maybe, you know, adding some margin or some, you're just doing a little something with the spacing. Not super important for right now. I do want the text to be blue because that's green, and that's black. So we'll change search students since that's more specific. All right, search by first or last name. Really no big deal. And then back down here, we'll throw a little heading in. Just kind of breaking up the different features visually on the page, pretty simply. And, you know, getting an idea on how you can add your own custom CSS to this. So far, so good. Now, what's left is really the bulk of what the feature set is to allow us to edit students. And so up here, we have a button to delete a student, and you know, like I've done before, if you refresh, they come back. So the data is not persisting. Again, future video, it will persist. Let's add another button here to be able to edit student. And so based on how this is currently laid out, I've got search student. So here's my remove student. So this is happening right here in the student class. And so right now in the student class, here's my button. So I'm going to need to add a button here. And this button okay, we'll say on click edit. I don't have any handler yet, so I'm gonna hold off on my on click. Just get the edit button up and going, and what current student says, hey, let's see what the magic wand sparkles is. That's a fun one. So we used it, it works. So let's do a font awesome icon equals kind of fun. Ooh. FA magic wand sparkles. There we go. And so there, now we have our edit button with our icon. And you know, the first time I did React and it was puzzling because if you think about how this should work, probably if you've seen this like on other pages, you know, you might click and edit on this student, and what happens is right now there's a bunch of labels with this student's information in it, and what would happen probably, is that these labels are replaced with text boxes. And this, you know, we would be presented with a save button, in which we can then edit the text boxes and click the save button. So that's what we're going to do. Click the edit button. When you do that, these labels turn to text boxes where you can then edit the text boxes and click save, and then that data is ultimately saved. So that's the direction that we're heading. Now, to get there, here we are in this student class. We need to display some of this code conditionally. And so the way this can be solved is with a Boolean variable. And this Boolean variable is, you can call it what you want, but I call it edit mode. And edit mode is either true or false. And if you're in edit mode, then you're displaying text boxes. And if you're not in edit mode, you're displaying labels. And so in order to do that, I'm going to create a hook. And const edit mode, set edit mode equals use state. And by default, you're not in edit mode. And if you think about this unordered list, the image, we're not going to edit the image in this particular case. We're going to edit the data. We're not going to allow the end user to edit their image for right now. All of the data in here in this unordered list. If you're in edit mode, then you're displaying an unordered list with text boxes. If you're not in edit mode, then you're displaying this. So this can be handled by doing this. If you're not in edit mode, and there you go. Okay, so really this shouldn't change anything right now, because by default edit mode is false, and this code says it renders conditionally that if you're not in edit mode, then display all the labels. And refreshing the page, you know, our app is still working the same. But if we are in edit mode, then let's display a little bit of a different list. So here we can kind of grab our list. And I'm not going to have the delete button in edit mode. So I'll start by copying and pasting the list, but I'll trim quickly. Okay, so the first couple things I'm going to delete when we're in edit mode are our buttons. And in fact, I'll replace it with a button. List group item. So this is our LI, and here's our button. This is our save button, right? Is button save, class name, button hyphen secondary. I don't have a click event handler here, but we'll just call this save. Okay, so now we're running code conditionally, saying, okay, if we're not in edit mode, then we show our labels. But let's just say we're in edit mode, and I'm just going to take this out just to test the edit mode. And really it'll just be 1, 2, 3, 4 and a save button. Okay, and so on our edit button, let's just set up an on click. and we'll put it in edit mode. Set edit mode to true. Okay, so now we have a click event handler, so we click edit and we'll see 1, 2, 3, 4 and a save button if this is working, and there you go. So we know that we're seeing edit mode. Now obviously we need to, when we click the save button, we need to get it back out of edit mode and we need to actually do the save. And so close, close, close. So here's where we are. Everything's going well. The next thing that we notice here is that all of our student information is currently stored in props. But keep in mind when we're working with state and we're working with text box, like user forms, where we're working with user input, up until now, everything we're doing has been using like setting a first name, last name, email. We've been using state hooks. We've been using hooks. And we have to keep doing that. We have to use hooks to allow a user to edit the state of a page. And so another thing that I want to refactor, and I feel like my list keeps getting bigger, is we're not keeping our code dry, because I'm going to end up repeating the first name hook. I'm going to repeat the last name hook, the email hook, and the grad year hook. And I'm going to be repeating it in the student class, so that we can, over here, have text boxes that allow us to update the user's name. And so I'm going to bring these hooks over, except for the file, because again, we're not updating the file, the image. I'm bringing these hooks over. And so again, my code is not dry. Don't repeat yourself. And I do want to refactor this. I'm going to take out the so first name, last name, email, and grad year. These are all things we're going to allow the user to update. It goes first, last, email, grad year in that order. So of course we want to keep them in that order. So let's just test this with first name. So how do we do this? We're going to have an input tag, self-closing tag, type of text, class name of form control, value equals first name, if we remember that, we've done this before. On change, we call set name. On change, arrow function, set name, set first name to be the event object, EVT dot current target dot value. Okay, now this might be a little confusing though. Why are we resetting first name to empty? We actually have the first name coming through in props. So that's not right. At this point, our student has a name. We should set the first name by using this props. First name should be initialized instead of being empty. And then what that will allow us to do is populate the text box with the user's current first name. Right now, the text box is being populated with an empty string. We want to populate that text box with the user's first name. Now, if you remember the use effect, remember use effect, we covered that one yesterday, is used for side effects, or the best case, most common case I've seen it used is for loading data, for loading data, whether that's from a database or in this case, we're loading it from props. And so By using useEffect, we can populate our hooks. I'm going to copy this over here. I'm going to call useEffect, and I'm just going to take out that line of code, and I'm going to bring in useEffect here. And in this useEffect method, what I can do is I can set first name to be props dot, I believe it is, what was I using down here? Props dot student. I was sending the whole student. Props dot student dot first name. Okay, this is going to allow our first name prop to be populated with that student's first name. We would do the same thing for set last name. Set email. Set grad year. Okay, now we've sent the student over. We sent the student over through the props argument or property, parameter, I should say, parameter, through the props parameter. And through the props parameter, we have access to our student information. We load that up in this useEffect hook. Now, when I go into edit mode, I should see a text box, and it should have our student's first name loaded up. And I should be allowed to change it. Now, this is not saving that student yet, but it's at least allowing the end user to do that. There's just a couple more steps to actually get that to overwrite our student list, or array of student objects, I should say. So let me go ahead and bring up localhost, click on edit, and see that Celine's name is pre-populated there in a text box. So this is the desired effect so far, and now we just got to kind of repeat it for the last name. And don't get burned on copying and pasting. So let's change everything that's necessary. Last name, set last name, current target dot value. Next up is the email and type of email. Get a little validation going there from the browser. Value email, set email. Is it called set email? I think it is. Set email. And grad year. Grad year. On change set grad year with whatever they're typing. We don't have a handler for save yet, but it's going to be the end of me. I don't know how many times I'm going to close it and have to reopen it. Should be Alt-Tab is your friend. Alt-Tab. Okay, so wonderful. We have this. We're going to be able to click on the save button, and that should do something. Very similar to delete, though. If we remember, what we did with delete was we wrote a function called delete student, remove student. We wrote this function in app.js, and we sent it via props into student.js. And the reason we did that is you need to be in app.js because this is ultimately where all students and search results, these are our hooks that are ultimately, really it's search results that are showing the results on the page, right? So if I kind of go back through my code here, we are mapping search results to display our students. And so now all students is different that search results, because typically search results can be filtered down, but all students we keep separate with everybody. And then search results we use as a filtered down version of all students. Point is, our save student function is written here. Add student is here, so we wrote the logic to add a student, we wrote the logic to search through our students, and we wrote the logic to remove students. So we'll also write the logic to edit a student here, and we'll pass it over just like we did with remove student. And so let's look at this logic and walk through it. To edit our students, because it's CRUD, create, read, update, we'll call it update student. I will take into this method a updated student. So we'll take in a single student object that has the new information in it. And what I want to do, I want to start by just taking that updated student and put it updated student. This is the function is called update student. The student object is called updated student. So yeah, a little risky business there, because it's pretty similar names, but let's keep that distinction in our head. So updated student. Now I need to pass update student as a function through props. So the prop will name update student equals update student. So now we pass that method over to student.js. And when we on-click save, we need to call a function here. My go-to function, we'll just say save student. So we're going to call a function called save student. Whoops. This doesn't exist, so we need to create this function. Const save student equals arrow curlies. And we need to create a student object that uses these hooks. So we'll say const updated student equals, here's our object, first name, prop, last name prop. I should say hook, first name, last name, email property, email hook, grad year, grad year. Now the entire student object also has an ID and an image. But notice we're not going to be changing the ID, we're not going to be changing the image. So we can actually use props here because we're not changing anything on those. So we'll set the ID property to what it was before, props.student.id. And we'll set the image property to props.student.image. So this is our updated student object, and this is what we need to send over to this function here called update student, singular, not updated student. So we need to call this update student. Remember, we passed it over through props. Probably one of the more confusing things is like sending data back and forth and through all these files. I get it, but it is what it is here. So we'll now props.update student, passing it the updated student object. And ultimately, we're going to click on save student, And what is that going to do? That's just going to take this student that is returned by, or that is sent into this method, and it's going to put it into a table. So if this is working to this point, it should accept our input and put it into the console. Okay, let's get rid of my breakpoints and refresh the page. Everything's working. Click on edit mode, and let's just add an S to his name. Here we're in the console. Click on save, and there you could see the updated student is sent back as a JavaScript object. We take that JavaScript object and we throw it into a table, and this is really good. Now our updated student is coming back into app.js, and what we need to do is we need to update all students in search results with this new student information. So here's how we do this. And I'll explain the code as I go. So here's my table, and we can keep that in a console. I'm going to create an updated array of objects, updated students array. So right now, all of our students are stored in all students. So we're gonna create a new array of student objects equal to all students dot map. Remember, a map is going to iterate each student. Where each student, okay, so this is our individual student. Again, this is kind of like looping the first student in all students. We're going to do a ternary operator. Remember, ternary is just kind of like a fancy if-else. So if this individual student, if the student ID equals the updated student's ID, that's our if statement. If the student's ID matches if the two IDs match, because this is looping all of our students. So this is one student at a time. It's going to have a different student ID. If it's true, then what we do is we say, hey, let's spread our student object, and so this breaks it down into property value pairs, and change what's different, basically updated student. And so basically here's the logic. When the IDs match, let's take the current student and replace it with the updated student. So that's what happens in between those lines right there. Now, if it's false, if the IDs don't match, then we don't change that student at all, and we just return student. So again, if the IDs match, return basically the student that has been updated. So replace the student values with the updated student properties and values. But if the IDs don't match, just return the student, because we're not changing any other student besides when the IDs match. So this is the shorthand for replacing an individual student object within an array. And then what do we do next? Well, thankfully, we wrote this fancy function that modifies all students and search results with an array of students. So we already wrote this function called save students. We've been using save students. And so we're just going to call save students. Notice we called save students and remove student. We're going to call save students here, passing it the updated students array. And so we shouldn't really need the console table anymore. With those two lines, we should be able to test it. Okay, what's going on? Well, I forgot to take it out of edit mode.
Oh, yeah.
We got to take it out of edit mode. The edit mode, obviously when we click on save, but what's interesting right now is my save in my student. Okay, so we call a function called save student. And here, but edit mode is, yeah, this is it. So we'll, right here, we'll set edit mode to false. And let's refresh. Let's edit. And there we go. Our edits are working. Deletes are working. Add students are working. Searching is working. Our CRUD operations are operational. We are doing great. Like I said, there's a lot of things I still want to do onto this. Refactoring this code in a way that just makes a little bit more sense. But by and large, CRUD operations are working, and quite happy with the current state. I think that's a good stopping point for today. The final projects that all of you will be creating are going to be very similar to this. Pick an entity and do CRUD operations with React and with React hooks. So I'll stop this video here.